The dawn of the internet is probably the sharpest double-edged sword that we've ever encountered. There has been a huge amount of really incredible new opportunities that have come out of that. But we also, I think, have seen the very serious negative effects that can also come along with it. And so finding the right balance and understanding where those pitfalls lie so that you could avoid them. Ultimately, you can't rely on the companies that create the technology to do that guidance for you, because there's a lot of profit opportunity in leveraging the negative impacts. We've seen that with the way that algorithms on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram steer you in the direction of continuing to doom scroll your way through life.
For people that don't know, Jevi, you and I have been having conversations like this for years at this point. I think our first one was down in Miami on the rooftop at a Fold event 5 years ago or something like that. So we've been talking about this stuff for a long time, and it's exciting for me to bring you on the show to talk about stuff that really hasn't been in the scope of the show, but now is. And I'm just thrilled to have you here. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Preston. Yeah, I'm excited. It's always been fun getting to chat with you over the years. And it's been fun to use Bitcoin as a medium of diving down all sorts of other rabbit holes along the way.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah, for people that maybe aren't intimately familiar with the Bitcoin community, when you go to a live event or event where other people are at, of course, people are talking about Bitcoin, but there's all these other topics that come up that people are just super passionate about. And one of them is just health, biotech, anything as it relates to just longevity is a very popular topic amongst Bitcoin. I mean, come on, if you're doing well in life, you want to live longer, you want to you want to enjoy yourself. So we're going to cover some of that on the show today. You want to start off, and I also want to start off on this idea of, technology is great. It gives us all these luxuries and we're able to do things with ease, but it comes with this double-edged sword of sometimes it cuts the other way too, where it can be very detrimental to our health. So take it away, tell people kind of your working thesis on this and why it's important to consciously think about this and to be aware of both sides of the coin, I guess.
Yeah. So throughout history, we have continued to innovate and create new technology, and it necessarily changes how society functions. And the dawn of the internet is probably the sharpest double-edged sword that we've ever encountered. There has been a huge amount of really incredible new opportunities that have come out of that. But we also, I think, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, have seen the very serious negative effects that can also come along with it. And so finding the right balance and understanding where those pitfalls lie so that you could avoid them. And ultimately, you can't rely on the companies that create the technology to do that guidance for you, because there's a lot of profit opportunity in leveraging the negative impacts. We've seen that with the way that algorithms on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram steer you in the direction of continuing to doom scroll your way through life and to basically fly on autopilot. And so ways in which you can leverage that to be aware of when it's sucking you in to the bad side, but to also then be able to take advantage of all the good.
Jack Dorsey recently talked about some of the pitfalls and how these algorithms are so deeply entrenched to get you just to scroll more.
Yeah.
And to the point where he's like, these things are programming you. It's not like you're programming it. And it was kind of a pause moment for me. And I know it was probably like 2 years ago. I was just looking at my X feed and they rolled out this feature where it was like AI generated, hey, this is what we think you like to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was going in there, what I was finding was there was things that I don't like to look at kind of popping up in there. But it's because previously I might have dwelled on something that was a salacious video or a whatever. And then because I paused and I looked at it, it started generating that type of content in this For You feed. When people started talking about this, I really made a conscious effort that if there was anything that ever popped up in that feed, I was going to immediately go into, like, we're obviously talking about X here, go into the dots up there, like not interested in this
Yeah.
content, or block. I literally block if it's something that is just not a fit or something that I just am like, why am I looking at this? I immediately go in there, either block it or tag it as not interested in this post. And for me personally, I feel like my feed is so much better now, especially for like the recommended content, because I've really aggressively tried to filter this. I'm curious, just your thoughts in general about these AI recommendation engines and like what it means, and just take us down this path.
Yeah, and it's funny because I had the exact same experience that you did when
Yeah.
that For You got rolled out, and I was so used to seeing it. This also predates the X shift. I don't have a Facebook account anymore, but
Yeah.
years ago when I did, they changed their feed
Yeah.
from being this just like natural feed of the people that you're following to then trying to feed in all sorts of other content that wasn't something that you were actually subscribed to.
Yeah.
And that shift was part of the reason that I decided, like, this is clearly no longer a platform for me.
Yeah.
But I ended up finding someone on X recommended a search query that you could bookmark that basically recreated the old chronological feed of just the people that you were following. And I've had that as my bookmark. And basically, if I type in twitter.com in my URL bar, it defaults to going there.
Yeah.
The problem, though, there's a clear advantage of using that approach, and that is that it gets you to actually be able to engage with the people that you follow, that you want to see their content, right? If you go to the For You page, there's a lot of content that people that you intentionally follow will never show up.
Yeah. It's more for like discovery, right? Like
it's more for discovery. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the other piece of it. And this is a perfect example of one of those double-edged swords where the For You page, that discovery can sometimes lead to finding new content creators or new people that are thinking in ways that you actually find compelling and that you want to then follow as well. So I think that you need to be able to work in both worlds and to be able to, as you have done, try and refine the algorithm to feed you the things that are actually valuable and that you find interesting, and to minimize the salacious or otherwise detrimental content. But it's, again, you're reliant upon a platform feeding you that information and doing so in a way that actually aligns with your ethos. And ultimately, where we've seen a lot of people draw concern with X and with other platforms is that the content really has to conform to their working guidelines.
Mhm.
And that's one of the reasons why people are moving in the direction of Nostr, and seeing this open protocol as an alternative where, in order to be deplatformed, it doesn't involve actually losing your ability to get your message out in the way that you intend for it and for your content to remain yours.
Just a quick admin note, because we have some listeners that aren't Bitcoiners and might not understand what Nostr is. So Nostr is a decentralized protocol that is able to do basically what you have on X. So you can download a client, any client you want. You have a pub key, a private key pair that allows you to go in there and conduct free speech. Nobody can delete your account. And it looks and feels a lot like X, but they don't have the algorithms. Or you can even switch to a different client provider, software provider that organizes your feed differently than maybe the one that you don't like. And Jevi and I both are of the opinion that with enough time, something like this actually might become more prevalent and more desirable by people, because they don't have the algorithms that are dominated by a monopoly like X or Facebook, feeding you the content. You have the choice to go to a different client provider that's not organizing your feed or your data in a way that is very clickbaity or like sucking you in so that you stay there all day and just doom scroll.
This could be a whole different topic that we could dive into, which is data security, data privacy, sovereignty.
Let's go there. So break this out.
What I think is interesting, and this is also a perfect example of where Bitcoin as a rabbit hole creator drops people into this environment. People that don't understand Bitcoin or haven't taken the time to understand Bitcoin are comfortable with continuing to use the existing financial structures, and they don't see the potential pitfalls there. And likewise, people that don't understand concerns regarding data privacy because they think to themselves, I have nothing to hide, so why should I care?
Yeah.
They haven't touched the stove yet. They haven't gotten burned, right? They haven't had their content removed from some provider. They haven't gone to a digital service provider, left their data there and had that data removed or otherwise taken from them. Sorry, you wanted to say something.
No, I think that point of view is the majority. I think if, you line up 100 people, at least 95 of them are going to be like, yeah, that's how I see this. Like, I don't have anything to hide. I actually kind of like that it's feeding me the stuff I'm actually interested in.
It's more convenient too.
Right?
That's
It's
the problem
more
is that like
convenient.
it takes effort to step outside of that controlled, centralized environment.
Yeah.
And so in order to take control and to understand where those pitfalls lie is just the first step. Then there's the next step, which is to go and execute and to be less reliant upon those centralized providers and to be more self-sovereign, understanding that there is benefit. Look, I don't want to become a digital Luddite. I think that's one of the common terms that I come back to. I see huge benefit from what a lot of these technology providers offer, but I want to do so with intention. I want to know that when I am using these tools, that I'm aware of where things can go wrong and where I can become too reliant.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I want to go with this is just when you look at somebody that's saying, well, you know what, it's kind of beneficial that it knows all this stuff because it's able to kind of feed me. That's the one talking point. But you and I both know like how dystopian some of this can get. And I think the concern isn't necessarily today. I think the concern is today already. But where I'm really concerned is where does this take us in 10 years from now?
Yeah.
Right? And if you set up the wrong habits or you're just not interacting with this in a conscious kind of way, 10 years are going to show up. And it's not like you can undo what you've done by not taking action today or thinking very deeply about where this is all going. So I think that's the foot stomp, at least where I sit. Is this bad now? Yeah, it's bad. But I think most people are kind of like, but I don't have time to set up all these other things. And there goes the argument. So as you're talking to the audience, give us your pitch on why it's so important to, and I don't think that what you're saying is that you need to leave that gated, ecosystem completely. But I think what you are saying is that you need to be very direct or very thoughtful in the way that you approach what you're actually using, and that you should have a foot in both camps and you can lean on one or lean on the other depending on what you're trying to accomplish, right?
Yeah, so let's use AI and LLMs as a perfect example of where to strike that balance. There is a huge benefit to these tools. Many of us in the Bitcoin space have jumped into it headfirst and seen the opportunity. I've been leveraging it in my day job as a product manager at Unchained. It's a huge benefit in making the process of gathering information and distilling it much more efficient. But you need to know where that information is going, because if it's just going into some public infrastructure without data controls around it, there's potential that there is information that is sensitive going out and potentially being utilized for training in ways that you wouldn't want it to be. And likewise, there's, I think, a huge opportunity for AI tools to become really high functioning second brains. I don't know if you've heard the term second brain before, but the basic premise here is we have used journals and private tools to be able to take down information for centuries, eons, right? But then leveraging that information that has been taken down and being able to recall it and synthesize it into new pathways that live outside of your brain takes a lot of effort. You have to then take time to step back and to look through it. And a digital second brain, the idea there being is that you can be capturing all this information and you can take down these ideas, and then you can leverage the technology to be able to assist you in finding those synthesis points. But in order to make that second brain really function in a way that is beneficial, you have to give the system all of your information, including private thoughts and conversations that you might have. And that feels antithetical to the privacy concerns that people should be carrying into these worlds. So that's where leveraging a private or a self-hosted LLM is really beneficial. The problem for a lot of people is that most privacy-oriented AI tools require effort. They are cumbersome, they are inconvenient, you have to host them yourself. More often than not, it then doesn't retain context about previous conversations that you've had.
Which let's just be honest, it's crazy helpful. I mean, the fact that I am able to go in there and use AI in a way, and it knows what types of questions I ask, it knows what topics I'm super interested in. And so that context of it knowing that is very helpful for me. Anybody telling you that it's not is, in my opinion, just lying about the utility, right? And so that's part of the challenge. And so you're getting at this idea where in order to do this in a secure way where big tech doesn't know everything about you, you have to set up your own server at your house, your own hardware, and you have to store all of these questions locally and not run them up into the cloud for big tech. So that's a tech burden. But we both realize that that is a worthwhile cause. But how do we convince others? And, I mean, everybody's got their rationale for why they would or wouldn't do something. I guess this is the real question. Is there a turnkey way to do it today that is pretty easy or easy enough for the common person to go out there? They aren't super tech savvy, but they're willing to try. Does that hardware exist? Does the software exist to be able to do that right now? Or are we like 3 to years out?
I think we're getting close.
Yeah.
I think we're getting really close. Early on, the capital investment was all going in the direction of convenience and centralization and large tech companies taking advantage because they had the capital to just chunk in there. And the privacy-oriented alternatives just weren't getting that investment. And I think that there are some really great examples that are coming about. One of them is Maple AI, which you may have heard of. Oddly enough, another Bitcoiner in the space that started that up. And the goal there is to make it a ChatGPT replacement at reasonably the same cost, but to not give up the convenience element of ChatGPT, that you can just quickly jump in there, sign up, have a website, not need to host anything yourself. And I love that direction that we're going.
How are they making sure that it's secure? Like, how would you be able to authenticate that? Or is it just kind of, they're telling you that they're not storing it, it's all encrypted on their cloud servers?
They have tools that allow you to validate the end-to-end encryption that they use. They're using technology that they developed called Open Secret. I don't want to dive into the technical specifics of it, but it's worth, for people that are listening, if you're interested in learning more, going and learning about Open Secret and Maple AI. I think that they're really incredible tools that are moving us in the right direction.
That's awesome. Okay.
The other thing that ties in with this notion of, are we at a point yet where taking control of your data or taking control of these tools is something that you can do at home, turnkey hardware? I've actually, over the last year, gone through the effort of setting up a lot of these self-hosted tools. A perfect example of this being the reliance that people have on Google Photos and iCloud Photos. I don't know about you, but for years, I was stuck in it, right? And it's like, how do I even consider moving out of this area? And I don't know if you're aware.
Let's just frame this for the listener that's not very tech savvy. Every one of these pictures that you're taking, it's geotagged. It knows the location. With AI now, you can take a picture almost anywhere in the world, and it knows exactly where, even if the geotag wasn't there, it knows the context. It knows people by referencing social media. So if you give access of all your picture files to some application that you have no idea who is the entity behind that application. It could be a foreign government. It could be whatever, right? And you give full access of every photo you've ever taken for the last, call it 10 to 15 years. Let me just tell you, you're giving up so much information to whoever that is. And so when you go into your apps on your smartphone and you say, have you given access to your photos, full access to your photos to any of these applications, you're basically giving them the full Monty on anything and everything you've ever thought about taking a picture, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I'll get off my high horse here, but it's a big deal.
It's a good thing to warn people about. I will say my experience with iOS is that they're trying to create better patterns for photo sharing with applications where you can have kind of like private photo access where only the specific ones that you want to share with a given app are going to be shared with them. But Apple has access at the end of the day to all of your photos. Yeah. And Google has access to all of your photos. And there have been documented instances where people have been convicted of crimes or child abuse or other things based upon evidence that was extracted from the photos that they were hosting with a given cloud provider.
Yeah.
So it's not just this like tinfoil hat thing as to whether or not that information is accessible to these companies. It's proven.
To your point that you were making before we went down this is if you're running your own local server or hardware device that is storing data and information, there's a way to store your photos locally so that you're not putting it into the cloud for people to run AI on it, right?
Yep.
And sorry to interrupt, but you were making another point there.
Yeah, I came in prior to Bitcoin and prior to being in tech. I was a freelance photographer, videographer, and I had, for the better part of a decade, I shot digital negatives, which are exponentially larger than a JPEG file. And I chose to go the route of never deleting any photos because, in my opinion, the space was available and it was better to keep everything and to be able to regain access to something than to think that you're okay to delete a photo and then realize after the fact that that was actually the one that you wanted to use. So that means that I amassed literally terabytes of content. And I was already doing a lot of digital asset management and keeping backups. It was very similar to my experience of backing up seed phrases and evolving through self-custody best practices, where I would have a backup hard drive at my computer. And then I realized, well, what happens if something happens to that backup hard drive? It's in the same location as my main computer that has all of the data on there. I should create another copy and keep it at another location. But what if both those hard drives degrade and I don't know about it? Finally reaching this point where I purchased dedicated hardware. It's referred to as a network attached storage, where you can not only have redundant hard drive space within the device, but it functions as a server where you can access it from anywhere. You can access it from other computers. You can access it from anywhere around the world, and you can run your own applications on it. It's really just like a souped up version of a computer that is designed with the express purpose of trying to store a lot of data. And my intention when building this out was, and this is exactly what I've been wanting to do for a long time. And I'm technically savvy enough that I'm going to go through this process, document the whole process, and then I'm going to share that information with friends and family. And Preston, I had to break it to you, but it's still really hard. And there were a lot of places where I got stuck and I was using ChatGPT to try and, answer my way through troubleshooting problems. And I think that we're getting closer to where that is more accessible. We have stuff like Start9 that is trying to be this like all-in-one server tool that can one-click your way into stuff. You still need some hand-holding, but I think that there is enough motivation now that people want to build that, and there's a demand for it. If you can get the convenience close to what the convenient factor is of an iCloud or a Google Photos, you're going to have something great.
I completely agree with you. You got Start9, you got Umbrel that are moving in this direction. What's really interesting for people that have never run their own Bitcoin node, which I'm sure a majority of people listening to the show have not, when you do this and you log in, it almost feels like an iPhone type app experience where you log in, you can download different applications onto your own home server, and you can kind of set up some of these tools. Like if you wanted to store all your photos on a device like this, the interface is actually pretty user friendly for the most part. Like I don't think that you need like a ton of tech experience to do it. Where I think that it's still a hard sell is when you look at how people are collecting and transmitting information, it's almost always coming from one of these devices, right? I'm holding up a cell phone for people that are just listening. And this is just my working theory. I think because people know that they're using one of these devices to create and transmit all this information, either through some type of Apple or Google device or Google operating system, they already know that they're still giving up everything to one of these two companies for the most part.
You don't have to.
For the most part. But where I'm going with this is, do we really need a hardware device that can compete in an open source kind of way to encourage people to go into the full privacy stack? And is that kind of the limiting factor? Because, I'll be honest with you, I feel like I want to go in all these directions, but I still feel like I'm just leaking out all of this private information and data. And it's kind of like, it's just not worth it yet. But if I had an open source phone that I could use, that it's not an Apple device, and go full on into the privacy stack, I think you'd have a lot more people that would commit. I'm kind of curious if you would agree with that.
There is a solution out there. Google Pixel devices, you can sideload a privacy-oriented open source software, an operating system, onto Google Pixel phones. It's called Graphene. And you can then use your phone in a much more privacy-oriented manner. You can still sandbox access to Google Play Store and use applications that need to interface with it, or even Google-specific applications like Maps or using Gmail. But it comes at a convenience cost. And that's it always remains part of the equation. And I think that there is a need to try and close that gap between the convenience of Apple and Google versus the complexity or the burden of needing to set things up yourself. One final piece that I wanted to add to the discussion around iCloud Photos and Google Photos. One of the main motivations that I had for setting up this home server, this network attached storage, is I came across an open source project called Immich, IMMICH. And it is a self-hosted alternative to Google Photos or to iCloud Photos, where you can run it on your device and it will automatically, as you take photos, back it up to your own server. It uses its own internal AI tooling to be able to do face detection, geotagging. It has an interface that is very convenient and user-friendly and very reminiscent of a Google Photos. In the process, I was able to set that up and migrate all of the photos out of iCloud Photos. Was able to turn off iCloud Photos so it's no longer backing up there. I can't do anything about the likelihood that they aren't honoring my request to delete the data that was already there, but that's a different conversation. You can only control the present and the future. You can't control the past. And that tooling is now, anytime I take a photo, it is automatically connecting to my network attached storage and is keeping that data in my environment. And they just got to a point where they have a stable release. It's only been around for a few years. It's been incredible to see what motivated open source developers can put together. And it's just like a call out that I want to make sure that I was giving so that people were aware of that, because I think that there is finally starting to be more of these tools that are a one click away from allowing you to migrate away from these centralized solutions. In terms of the hardware, I mentioned being able to migrate your Google Pixel phones over to Graphene. There's also, I think, other concerns related to technology that I think we start to segue into, which is the concerns regarding light and the impacts on circadian rhythm.
Yes.
And all of our devices are, whether they are Apple or Google or they're a laptop or whatever it might be, they are shining in our faces day and night. And a lot of people walk through life unaware of the impacts that that has on them.
Let's go down this rabbit hole. So since we started the show, we've been talking about the software implications, right? And what that means. Now we're going to pivot and we're going to go into the hardware ramifications. And what I think is lost on a lot of people when we start talking about all of this technology, like I just had a gentleman on 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about Tesla and all these robo-taxis and the battery technology. But what is almost never discussed is the electromagnetic frequency on all of this stuff. It's almost like it's the thing to ignore and to never discuss, because it's so nice having AirPods, or it's so nice having an iPad, you name it. All of this technology, and people might think this is a tinfoil hat kind of topic, but I'll tell you what, I pay a lot of attention to people that I respect immensely for their deep thinking. And every one of these people keep coming back to this idea of electromagnetic frequency, the radiation with some of these devices. And just to name a couple, your AirPods, electric cars, the frequency of the light coming off of all these LED lights. Just going into a hardware store and trying to get a luminescent bulb like you used to get from back in the day, it's nearly impossible to find them without it being a decorative type bulb. And you look at the frequency of these bulbs and what those ramifications are. Our eyes were not designed to be handling these types of frequencies that are coming out of all of these devices these days. So give us the rundown on your thoughts on all of the hardware emissions and what it means from a health standpoint and just overall ramification long term. What does this mean?
Here's a fun exercise that you and anybody else that's listening to this can try out for themselves. When you're in your home and you've got lights on, if you're out at a bar or a restaurant or anywhere else around town, take out your phone, open up the camera, switch to the slow-mo camera, and just shoot 5 or 6 seconds of the space and then play it back. More often than not, what you're going to see is what your eyes cannot perceive, which is the lights just flickering like crazy. When we think about like going to a moody restaurant or a nightclub or anywhere else, we're expecting, dim lighting and it's all nice. And, think about the salt lamp that I've got in the background here, right? Like moody lighting. When you're using a lot of LED lights, which are more modern solutions to creating lighting, you end up needing to dim it in different ways. In some cases, you are able to dim the light itself and have it remain a solid light. But the cheaper way to do it is to cut the amount of electricity and to just like cut it in and out such that it is perceived as lower intensity by your eyes. But to the naked eye, you can't see that flickering occur. Unfortunately, while you can't perceive it, your brain does, and your brain is having to work overtime. And this can also, there is some potential concerns that could be a large contributor to some of the behavior that has been attributed to ADHD over the years. I remember seeing there was a research study where they had a classroom and they had on one day, they had fluorescent bulbs that were flickering, and another day they had fluorescent bulbs that didn't flicker. And the behavior and the way that these kids interacted, totally different, right?
Wow.
We're looking at like kids jumping off the chairs versus sitting quietly and be able to take in the information. And it's just another example of where the potential physical impacts of modern technology are hiding in plain sight and we don't recognize them. EMF is just another example of this. We don't really know the extent to which this can cause problems. I want to caveat this by saying I am not a scientist. I'm not an expert. I'm an enthusiast. I don't want to come off as some kooky conspiracy theorist, but I do think that there is a level of scrutiny that needs to be applied to these things that many people aren't doing, because doing so would disrupt the convenience factor that we've currently come to enjoy.
Yes.
We've seen the concerns regarding Wi-Fi and some people pushing for still wanting to use Ethernet cables to connect all of your internet connected devices. But outright swearing off Wi-Fi is not a very convenient thing. We've seen people yell about the difference between 4G and 5G. I think that some of those arguments have gotten a bit too outlandish, but I do think there is potentially something there. And do I really need to have that extended speed of 5G relative to 4G? Probably not. So there's a lot of concerns that I think people just need to be aware of them. And again, not to swear off all conveniences in the technological solutions that are out there, but to find the ones that you prioritize, because those are the ones that really make a big difference.
Yeah. When you talk about the LED lights and the flicker that's associated with it, the on-off that you don't get with a luminescent bulb, I'm reminded of this book. It was, I think it's called Consciousness in the Brain is what I think the name of the book is. And they talk about this experiment that they did with individuals where it was like, and I'm going to mess up the name, but it's a toilet paper tube test where they basically put a monocle over each eye simultaneously. And they put two different pictures on each eye. So maybe the left eye had a picture of a cow, and then the right eye had a picture of a rooster or whatever. And when you look through these monocles, what they were testing is forcing the brain to see one image. And they were curious, like, how would a person's brain interpret, what are they going to see? Are they going to see the cow, or are they going to see the rooster? Because they're forcing each eye to see something different. And what was interesting in the experiment is that a person, when they look at this still image, is your brain will actually flip-flop. It'll see the cow, and that's all it'll see. And then call it 5 seconds or 10 seconds later, it flips to the rooster, and then all you can see is the rooster. And then 5 seconds later, it flips back. At this frequency, it flips back and forth between the two images. Bitcoin mining has a reputation for being impersonal, risky, and full of hidden fees. But one company is flipping that script, and it's Abundant Mines. Abundant Mines was founded by Bo and Christine Marie Turner, two Bitcoiners who lost over $500,000 to mining providers that overpromised and underdelivered. Instead of walking away, they built the company they wish had existed when they first started mining. With Abundant Mines, clients actually own their machines. And in Oregon, they come with no sales tax. There's one flat monthly fee for hosting, no surprise repair invoices, and if a rig ever goes down, their system redirects hash power so your earnings don't miss a beat. But what really stands out is how personal the experience is. Every client gets direct support, ongoing education, and guidance from a real human being who lives and breathes this mission, so you never have to be left guessing. In addition, through 100% bonus depreciation, mining can offer major tax advantages that you don't get by just buying Bitcoin. Their clients describe it like acquiring Bitcoin for half price when factoring in the returns and the write-offs. They've put together a thoughtful gift just for listeners of this show that could potentially save you thousands of dollars. There's no pressure, just something to help you think through if mining is actually right for you. So if this is something you're curious about and you want to learn more, you can check it out at abundantminds.com/Preston. That's abundantminds.com/Preston. But what they then did next, which was really fascinating, is they put it onto a video. They turned the picture into a video. So it was a video of a cow that looks like it's just a still image. And then the video of a rooster that was, again, just a still image. And what they did is they took a one frame, and I think it was cycling at like 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second. I can't remember which one it was. I kind of think it was 30. And they swapped out one image on, just say it was the cow video. They took one of the 30 frames, and instead of it being a cow, they made it, call it a bullseye or some random picture, right? But it was just one frame out of 30, okay? So the person who's looking at these two different images, they think that they're just seeing a still picture. They don't even realize that it's a video, okay? But what did the brain do? The brain stopped flipping from the one image to the other, and it just stayed fixated on the one that had the one frame every 30 seconds. And the viewer, the person who was looking at this, said that all they saw was and I forget what I said in the example, but let's just say it was the cow that had the one frame that was swapped into the bullseye. When they looked at this, even though they're seeing both things, right? They're looking at both things. The only thing that their brain was interpreting was the video that had the one frame that was swapping out. And so the reason I tell this long story is you might not think that you're seeing or that your brain is comprehending something that's happening in a very short amount of time. In this case, 1 frame per 30 seconds. Like the person didn't see a bullseye at all. They just saw the picture of the cow permanently, and they didn't even know that why their brain wasn't flipping over to the other image like it was before when it was a still image. But the processing that's happening in your subconscious is so profound. It's something that I read this years ago. I think that was the right book. But I bring all this up because of this idea of these LED lights that are flickering on and off, and I don't know what the frequency is for a lot of them. People would just like say, well, all I see is a permanent light, just like a luminescent bulb, and clearly there's nothing wrong there. And I would argue, I think there's proof out there that what's happening in our subconscious is way more profound than what any of us can possibly imagine.
Yeah. At 30 frames per second, an average video camera is also not going to perceive this. But something that you'll notice, depending on the intensity of the flickering, you'll sometimes notice the light. There's like a horizontal band that will move slowly through.
Yeah.
And if you do the slow-mo, suddenly that horizontal band moving slowly becomes this very noticeable flickering. I think that the brain stops being able to perceive flickering at like 1,000 hertz or something.
Yeah.
And so there's a long way for us to go. So ideally, you want to use light that is going to be consistent. But once you have consistent light, you also need to think about the spectrum that's involved. One of the things that we've seen in the last, let's call it 20, 30 years, the emergence of these LED bulbs and oftentimes being sold as energy saving, right? And you're doing your part for the environment because they last longer and they are cheaper and they're more environmentally friendly. What they failed to tell you is that large amount of the energy savings came from getting rid of a lot of the light spectrum that you would otherwise include with a fluorescent or a halogen or an incandescent bulb. And in doing so, it was concentrating a lot of the light output in the blue area that I should say in and of itself isn't necessarily the worst thing possible. If you go outside midday sun, there's a ton of blue light, right? The difference, however, is that you're experiencing that blue light in conjunction with a broader spectrum, including ultraviolet and infrared. And that is what our bodies were evolved to be able to process and perceive. And throughout the course of the day, we see the spectrum shift. Very early on, it's very orange, it's very infrared geared. And then throughout the day, it becomes more full spectrum, moving into the UV direction, and then tapering off towards the end of the day. Not only has that been an important part of our ability to perceive light and to go through life in a healthier manner, it also shapes our circadian rhythm. And it does so in a way that we don't really perceive as an average person.
In a major way, too. I don't think I know when I travel international and into all these different time zones, what I've learned through AI, because I've asked it, I was like, how can I get to the new time zone faster or more quickly without having all the, what the number one thing it said was, get out first thing in the morning when the light comes up and make sure that you get a lot of that into your eyes, and it's going to help you adjust to the new time zone faster than pretty much anything else you can do. And it goes to this idea that you're talking about, which is how heavily tied your circadian rhythms and the timing of your entire body and your entire system is to that light source and that frequency that you're getting at that certain time of the day.
Your eyes and your skin are absorbing all of this light information, and your body uses that to decide what hormones it should be releasing.
Yeah.
And it signals to the body it's morning time. It's, active time. It's sedentary time. It's time to go to sleep and to heal and to process the day. And a lot of people are hijacking that circadian rhythm without even realizing it, right? The tech is so addictive that they'll stay watching their TV until 11 o'clock at night. And it then takes hours for their body to wind down and to then be able to start to get into those deep and REM sleep cycles. And I think that people are missing that aspect because it is, to a degree, ironically, invisible to them, right? You'd think that light is going to be the most visible thing, and yet the way in which it interacts with your body is entirely invisible. So I think that there are ways in which you can mitigate that. One is spend as much time as you can outside. And to your point, first light is probably the most important because it sets you up for the day.
Yeah.
And it really punches your system to find that marker of where you should move forward. The other is to be aware of how you should support your circadian rhythm throughout the day. And you're not going to be averse to blue light altogether. I take, for example, as a product manager, I'm having to work with designers and image files, or when I'm a photographer and I'm looking at photos, I need to be able to see exactly the definition of that color spectrum as it's intended, and that's going to involve some blue light. But if I'm working on some tech stuff and it's getting into the afternoon, I have a program on my computer that is called Iris. There's other tools called Flux. I've seen a bunch of different ones around, and you can adjust the color temperature of your screens.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, but it gets a long ways there. You can also use color filters on your iPhone. You can set almost getting to a red light if you want to be able to use it in the evening time still to send some last minute messages. But again, there are plenty of people who aren't able to just conform their technology use to the ideal circadian rhythms of night and day.
Yeah.
As an example, I've got 2 kids, and there are times when I need to, hang out with them for the afternoon and make dinner and spend time with them and get them to bed and read a story. And once I've done that, I might still have some things that I need to do. I might still need to get some work done, or I have some personal projects that I want to be working on. And that is one of the rare moments throughout my day where I have time to myself. But I'm also planning on getting to sleep relatively shortly thereafter. You can mitigate that with some of these tools, but there's still going to be some impacts with blue light. This is actually one of the reasons why about a year and a half ago, I got really excited about this new product that came out called the Daylight tablet. It is an Android tablet.
These guys, just the foot stomp, these guys are crazy brilliant. I've met these guys, and what they're building is mind-blowing.
Well, here's the thing that I find so fascinating about it is that it's effectively an Android tablet, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're getting a device that functions like an Android tablet.
Yeah.
The difference is they've stripped out color as a function of the screen, and they're trying to use this technology. I believe it's transflective LCD, basically where light can not only pass through from underneath the screen array, but it can also deal with light that's coming from outside and reflect back to you. Mm-hmm. Think of it similar to what you see with a Kindle and e-ink tablet.
Yes.
Where there's when you go and you sit outside with a device like that, you can see it even better than you could inside. But the reason for using this transflective version is that then they're able to have a light source that they've built in that is intentionally designed to avoid the use of blue light and to reduce the opportunity for flickering.
My understanding is that they're working on trying to make it a color display despite no light being emitted from the device. I've seen and held the device and look, it's pretty phenomenal how it just kind of makes you feel as far as in the evening when you look at this thing. It's just a completely different experience, but the refresh rate. So for a person who has seen a Kindle and done the Kindle reader, it's almost like an Etch-a-Sketch. But the difference is the refresh rate of what it's doing. It can play videos, it can do all of these things, but yet it still looks like this Etch-a-Sketch type picture. It's wild.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that is the tool that I use when I put the kids to bed and I still want to do some writing or some research.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That is my tool. I use it every single day, and I pay a lot of attention to my sleep cycles and trying to maintain sleep consistency. And a big part of longevity is having a very consistent bedtime and wake time. And there are days when I'm just able to wind down and I want to read a book. There are other days where I still want to be productive and do some writing. And I can do all of it with this single device. And to me, that's just a really huge unlock. Being able to still use technology and not be stuck, trying to write stuff down on paper. As we were talking about earlier with that second brain concept, the more that you can capture that information in a digital form, the easier it's going to then be to work with that within an AI tool and to be able to do recall and distillation and synthesis of that information.
Amazing. For people listening to this, a lot of the conversations that we're going to have that are tech related are going to be talking about the benefits and somewhat ignoring the side effects or the consequences, which, I tell people this all the time. As an aerospace engineering example is you can't have lift without corresponding drag. Drag is always part of it. It's just a matter of like how much drag is associated with the lift that you're producing off the wing. And when we're talking about tech and we're talking about the benefits, often we're just talking about that lift vector and completely ignoring any type of drag that's associated with it. And this is why I was really excited to have this conversation, Jevi, for people, because so much of the stuff that we're going to continue to cover on the show, we're there talking about why it's so beneficial, why it's so exciting. Because, come on, the stuff that's happening right now is beyond exciting. It's the stuff you imagined, as a kid,
Really
be
is.
driven around by a car without no driver and stuff like that. It's just like miraculous what's coming at us. But we have to go into this with eyes wide open and to really have an appreciation for some of the consequences, some of the drag that's coming off of all of this stuff. And if we don't, approach it early, it's going to be 10, 15 years later. And it's going to be, in all intents and purposes, a little too late to kind of like backtrack some of the things that you've given up, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah.
And so you've done such an amazing job just kind of like throwing out some really core things that people need to think about and to like really make a conscious decision. Am I okay with this? Is this something that I'm willing to just ignore? And unfortunately, I think a lot of people are going to say, yeah, I am okay with ignoring. But hey, we're covering it. We're trying to make sure that you're aware. And I'm sure that the feedback from the show is going to be very positive. And we probably need to keep doing conversations like this moving forward because you do such a great job just kind of laying it out for people so that they understand it in a fair and balanced kind of way.
Yeah, I think I certainly came into this conversation being a little nervous that it was going to come off as being all over the place and not being too focused. I think there's a lot of information to digest from this. If anything, my hope is the one thing that people take away is to be just that little bit more aware of the potential concerns and to question. This isn't a call to arms to swear off technology. I use technology in my life every single day. It's about finding the ways to be able to keep it in your life and to get the best out of it without just going and being a mountain man in the forest. And I think that some of these tools that we've discussed today are more accessible than others. But I'm happy to come back at any point in time and keep jamming on this stuff. There's probably 14 different topics we didn't even cover.
Yeah. Yeah, and we didn't even get to the hardcore stuff like CRISPR or whatever, right? Like there's so many other things that are But yeah. Hey, if you're listening to this, you enjoy the chat, we're going to have a link to Jevi's X account, also his Nostr account. So if you do have other things that you would love for us to kind of cover or address, throw it out there, send it over to us so that we're aware of what that is. And Jevi, thank you so much for making time and coming on the show. This is long overdue. This is conversations that we have from time to time, regardless of whether we're recording or not. So I was thrilled to be able to do this with you.
Absolutely, Preston. It's my pleasure.
Anything else you want to throw out there that people can check out?
I, a couple of years ago, started a Substack called Primal Cut Sheet.
Okay.
I haven't been writing as much in there anymore. Kind of got to the saturation point that I was looking for, but it's tips and insights on how to buy beef in bulk and why you should
Oh,
be
yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
And the motto being the correct number of chest freezers to own is one more than you currently have.
We didn't even go down that rabbit hole, which
Oh.
is another, we've had long conversations on that one too. Maybe for next time. All right, folks, that's all we have for you this week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
For the first time in human history, we're developing something that can outcompete human labor eventually at all levels. We're going to be developing a system that can do absolutely everything better than a human can. It can be a craftsman at all times. There'll be no sloppy work. It'll be doing things to perfection every single time. Not only that, it can work probably 22 to 23 hours a day. But over time, not only will it be as capable as a human, it'll probably become more capable.